Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Cinefile, the podcast celebrating cinema one film at a time. Each week, my co-host Jake Biller and I break down a film, discussing anything from mise-en-scène to scenes you missed. Today, we talk about the emergence of the boogeyman in 1978's Halloween. This is the first of our spooky Cinephile series, another lovely graphic made by the Jake Biller. This was my pick this week, and Jake, you told me, you said, okay, you just need to pick a film that exemplifies Halloween in your mind. So, of course, I picked the film called Halloween.
Exactly. It was right
And
there.
it was right there. It was right there for me to pick. And I had seen this movie once before. And it was in college. And I guess the thing I remembered about it, because I texted you beforehand, I was like, I remember it being pretty good. It's not, but I, what I, for some reason, I think I just was pleased that I wasn't more scared because I don't like scary movies and neither do you. So
No.
we truly are doing this for our adoring public.
Yes. Yes, because we're not scary movie fans. Um I've seen maybe five in my whole life. Yes, I'm a wimp. I don't like haunted houses. I don't like scary things. Just not my thing. Um if I go to another haunted house, I feel like I'm gonna run through the wall because I'm gonna freak out, but that's neither here nor there. This wasn't bad for me, like it
In
wasn't.
like a scary sense.
Yes, yeah, like I
Yeah.
was just like, I mean, maybe it was because I watched it at 2 in the afternoon with all the lights on and the window open, and I'm like, I'm not gonna be scared. But like there's definitely like typical jump scares in this, but it's not. um I've definitely seen worse and more gruesome movies, and for like a quote unquote slasher movie, this really isn't that slashery. I mean, there's very minimal gore. Um,
Yeah.
and there's what I want to say like five bodies, five or six.
Um,
I think it's five.
Four.
Is it only four?
I think it's only four
Okay.
because it's the original where he kills his sister.
Yeah.
And then we see where he brings back the headstone, which we're going to talk about. There's one laying on the bed, one that falls from the. I was like, how in the Home Alone did he have time to freaking put
I
everybody
know.
up? And then another person like in a closet or something. So I think it was only four.
Well, then when the doctor finds the car, there's one in the bush there that like the characters don't see, but like there's like it's like a reveal kind of shot as he's
Oh,
walking away, and he's like over in the bush.
yep, yep.
That's where he gets the mechanic's
That
jumpsuit.
could be
So
anybody's body. Anybody could have killed that person.
sure,
Yeah.
we'll go with that. But as far as like a just as a movie, was not a big fan of this. There are some interesting things that I'm excited to talk about because this is like quintessential horror, and I feel like kind of is the foundation on what everything that's come after it has been built on, if you follow me.
Yes, and
There are very like clear cut um building blocks of story that are evident in all. I should say all. I haven't seen that many, but I feel like it's evident throughout, you know, modern horror films and everything that came after this. So I think it's cool that we're talking about it from that standpoint of how influential it is. And also, I the quality on this was not good. That was one of my big beefs. I mean, we'll get into the minutiae of that, but can we just appreciate the fact that it was shot in 21 days? on a budget of $320,000 in what is this? 19 came out in 1978, so it'd be 1977 when they shot it, and it has grossed over 47.2 million. Now, if you adjust that for inflation to today's money, that's like making a movie of 1.5 million and grossing $222 million. So this was a success.
Yeah, I mean, and especially horror is this interesting genre where a lot of these low budget films made in a relatively short amount of time make a lot of money, because the point of a slasher film is not exactly storytelling, which that's part of the reason why I don't like this movie, because there's no story.
Yeah.
Really. I'm like, there's so many entry points. You know what I mean? To dive deep into like a character study of Michael Myers, and none of them are explored. But the point of a slasher film is the jump scare, is the tension. If you can create that, people are going to come see it. Yeah. So it completely makes sense that it actually kind of did boffo business at the like at the box office, and it was made so quickly in 21 days. But like as a jumping off point, like I just mentioned, for Michael Myers, the jumping off point for this podcast, yeah, it was made in 21 days, but it wasn't made well.
No, it's from a story standpoint, I feel like we gloss over pretty much every character. I don't really know anything about any of our characters. I know that what's even her name? Laurie, Jamie Lee Curtis. I know that she babysits. I know that all her friends are getting it on with their boyfriends. And I know that Michael Myers is Psycho.
Yes. But Psycho's such a better film.
Yes.
like yes. Head and shoulders above. And you're absolutely right, because I texted you a bunch. You were asleep, because I watched this at night, which was, my first great decision. And because you had talked about the breathing and stuff, but what did I say? I said something about the
Get bro an inhaler. Like, come on.
I said this town is horny.
Yes.
Like literally all of these, and I don't look, I was probably pretty sheltered, as I probably sheltered myself as a high school kid, to be honest with you. So I'm not here saying, oh, this is very realistic because this is what happens. I have no idea. But like, are you telling me that all the interactions the past like of these 2 days where we see these characters all have to do with having sex with one another? Like literally all of them, like every conversation, it's about getting it on, and then, oh, Laurie doesn't want to ask so and so, I think it's Ben or something, or Brian or something, out, and she's like too chicken to do it.
Yeah.
And that to me is this whole thing reeks of lazy storytelling.
Yeah.
But back to the production value. One of the other things I texted you about was the ISO. And I don't know, I didn't get up to check my TV, because there is on occasion where it does this weird brightness thing. But was it like they just never knew what to use the ISO? Like, right. It was so, the lighting was terrible.
Yeah. No, it's definitely in the daytime sequences, it is definitely, it comes off as a touch overexposed. So I definitely picked up on that.
It bothered me a lot.
I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt and say that they did it as a creative choice.
I thought you might say that, and if it was made for more,
it's not
like it was made for like chump change. So I
will say it is not the correct choice.
That is true. That is true.
It is not the correct choice. But it seemed like they were going for this very like because you can tell like they've pulled some of the color out of the image in the daytime sequences, and it's just like you can tell that they're going for this kind of like high contrast, low saturation kind of image, which I'm all here for, but at the same time, like you still have to like properly expose the image.
And I think you're absolutely right. Like, look at it as well. If it was a lot of indoor sequences,
Mm-hmm.
I think it would have worked better.
Yeah.
Right. But when you have the sun, which is
She bright.
she, the sun be bright. Or if you go and see the new Paw Patrol movie, Paw Patrol, the Mighty Movie, they have a whole Dora short in front of it, and where Swiper steals the sun. And I was like, wait, bro, what?
What is this? His swiper been hanging out with Gru.
I don't
Gru
know.
wants to steal
Steal a
the
moon.
moon, and so Swiper's like,
And,
guy,
and
I gotta one up him, and so he steals the sun.
and then Dora goes, Swiper, put it back. And he goes, the name's not put it back or something. It's Swiper. And I'm like,
What?
somebody wrote this. Somebody wrote this, but all the little kids. It was a really big weekend for Paw Patrol.
Yeah.
And all the little kids, like when she goes, where do you think they're going? And then they're like, Swiper! Like all these kids were like yelling out. It was kind of cool. But bro, like freaking stole the sun. Anyway, so they should have used Swiper from Dora uh as their lighting tech because I mean even even if we were to say okay that was a creative choice, why are they just supposed to, are they just suggesting that um it's like a dull city, like it's like a like the characters' lives are kind of dull,
Yeah.
you know, like
I don't know.
what are they suggesting with this?
I'm not really sure. It's all about, I think, manipulating your senses, right? And I think that's really kind of uh, what I was talking about when it comes to like foundational, like textbook horror movie. Is like this very much is a movie that tries to manipulate your senses, right? It's either like a scene that's very, very dark, and then there are bright flashes of light, or like, you know, things pop out and they're fully lit up, and so you notice them and it's startling. The same thing of like sounds, like it'll be like very, very quiet, and then boom, there's a big noise, or like there's a big like jump in the sound effects, or like we've had like a lot of music, and then it just cuts away, and so it's kind of manipulating your senses to try and get the visceral reaction out of the audience, because like we said, this is really a movie about the jump scare, because that's where that's its goal, is to frighten the audience, and it does
And
that through jump scares.
that's really interesting you mention the audio as well, because when we look at yeah with jump scares and the way this is really a foundational movie, I mean this was made in 1970, like you said, probably around in 77, which like why wouldn't John Carpenter rather just go and watch Star Wars again?
Exactly.
But that's a whole nother thing. And his influence in this movie is significant. We're going to talk about that as well. But these are kind of foundational horror elements. And I guess we can give this movie a pass because um, it came out, it kind of, I don't want to say it ushered in this idea, but it's clear that this is a type of movie that will become very popular. And I don't think at the time it was very popular.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we mentioned Psycho at the beginning, right? Psycho came out in 1960. And obviously this movie came out 18 years later than that. But Psycho was more a character study,
Mm-hmm.
right? It really was. And it was more of a mystery. And this isn't that. This isn't a character study. And I would argue that this really isn't a mystery.
Yeah.
Because we know what the mystery aspect is. Okay, every serial killer has like an MO, right? Or a certain type of person they like to kill. So when we're looking at this, my mind frame like what I was looking at was, okay, um what are the characteristics of these kills? Like, what are the characteristics of the people? So then I can maybe put together, okay, he's not going to kill this kid, but he will kill this teenage girl. Um, but uh, yeah, so I think they introduce a lot of these elements, but I just don't think that, and especially when they did this in what, 3 weeks, I don't think they had the ability to really flesh out, okay, what, or they didn't even have the body of work at the time to be able to flesh out what is going to be most successful. How are we going to do this the best way? And basically, what they just did was just open and essentially unlock and open all these doors of ideas that will be played upon and played and done better, honestly, in future projects.
Right. No, I agree. It's the best way to describe this, I feel like, is this is a movie that you don't experience it in your brain so much as you experience it in, I don't want to say your heart, but like in like your nervous system or something. Because it's very much, you can know that this story is terrible and like there's no thought given to any of it. But when the bodies, when that body comes swinging down, like you still have that jump scare. You can know it's
Right.
coming and you can still have that jump scare. And that's what this movie tries to be. It's an experiential film. It tries,
Interesting.
its goal is to elicit an audience reaction. And I think when you look at it in that sense, I'm not going to go as far to say this is a good movie, but I can understand some of the choices that are made. But also on the
Sure.
flip side of the coin, knowing that this was made for like no money in 3 weeks, I can also understand some of the choices that were made from a cost-effective standpoint, and I don't like that.
Yeah. I do want to touch on the audio
Yeah.
as well, because you texted me and you're like, this is genuinely one of the worst mixed movies
Yeah.
I've maybe ever seen. Because you like we had talked in the open, you'd never seen this movie before.
Right.
So why don't you talk a little bit about that? Because that really annoyed me as well.
Yeah, I noticed it more in the front half of the movie, I will say. It was like once I texted you about it, I don't know if it's just like I got it, like I got the thought out of my mind or whatever, but I didn't notice it as much, or I don't know if it's not as bad in the back half of the movie.
Right.
But I feel like there's some definite mix issues where I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be listening to necessarily. Like it really loves the score, and like it's an iconic score, and you play that track, and everybody or almost everybody can tell you what that's from.
Yeah.
And I think the score is one of the places
Paw
where this
Patrol.
move with this. Uh-huh. Yeah.
That's where the score is from.
Wrong.
Sorry.
Um
There were so many people I had to serve at Paw Patrol. And they all wanted the souvenir bucket. And they all wanted the cherry slushy.
uh, um
Anyway, please continue.
Now I lost my train of thought thinking about cherry slushies. Um,
The score. The score is
or
very
yes,
iconic. And honestly, so I did want to mention that John Carpenter did the score.
really
Yes.
interesting.
He came up with the piano. It's like what, 3 notes? I think it's three
Basically,
notes and four, like it's like, C, D, E, C, C or something, like, like it's like just like three. Obviously, I
hmm
don't think it's C, D, and E. I don't actually know what the progression is, but it it's like high enough in the
hmm
trill. But yeah, I think it's done really, really effectively.
yeah. And honestly, like I like the um. There's obviously like the main theme that I knew right away when it rolled over the title credits. Um, but honestly, I think as far as like an actual piece of score, the like counter theme I think is more successful in a way. I don't know, I felt like that like more was in tune with what the emotion was for the scene and what I'm supposed to be getting out of it as the audience. So I thought that was really interesting. But I feel like this movie is in love with the score in that it's all over, like it's used a lot throughout. And I also think it's mixed. The score is very prominently mixed in, and wasn't necessarily a fan of that because I felt like I lost some dialogue, but then again, the dialogue was not recorded well because like it was like a lot of it was overmodulated in the first half, I thought, especially like the screams, or like they didn't know how to like record it correctly so you could get like a full out scream from somebody without it being overmodulated, right? Because there are times that like I felt like it was a full out scream that was overmodulated, but then I also feel like there were times that were like they had to redo it, or in my mind I'm like, oh, they probably had to redo this because it was so bad. But then you end up with someone going ah, and it's like it's not a convincing scream,
Right.
you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
So it's like it's this audio is such a fickle thing. I deal with it at work all the time, and I'm like, why do you you're loud enough but you're not loud enough, and it's like it's a very fickle thing. We could spend hours talking about the pains of audio. But I felt like it wasn't understood well, how they needed to record this in some instances. So I felt like that really kind of contributed to the poor sound quality.
Right. I mean, and I always watch, right. I am a through and through subtitle advocate. So I always watch movies with subtitles. But I, even with the subtitles and being able to hear the dialogue, I definitely noticed there were audio issues. And I think that once again, that speaks to the idea we've brought up that this is very much the foot in the door kind of movie, right? This is the door that unlocks the keys that a lot of different filmmakers can kind of take and run with. And it's really interesting that John Carpenter made this, because John Carpenter also did The Thing. And I don't know if you noticed, but the kid that Laurie's babysitting turns on the movie The Thing, the OG movie The Thing. That was an RKO picture. And I thought that was really interesting that he did that, because it was like a nice, but I don't know when he did The Thing.
I couldn't tell you.
I might need to look that up. But yeah, John Carpenter's The Thing is
yeah.
a thing. The other thing I looked at was the idea that I wanted to bring up is this idea of hiding in plain sight.
Okay.
Because Michael Myers, low key, is hiding in plain sight.
Yeah. He doesn't like, it's so strange. And I feel like this is like one place where it lost me, like as far as like verisimilitude. He's like on the run, but he then just, like you said, hides in plain sight. He just like, he's full on like stalking all these. I mean, he stalks the little kid. What's it? Tommy, is that his name? Yeah,
I think so.
He stalks like Tommy at the elementary school, and then like is just driving down the road in the nurse's car from the prison that he broke out of. Like, has no one ever heard of an APB? All points bulleted is what that stands for in law enforcement.
Yeah, I didn't know what it stood for, but I've heard of the APB.
But like it's or they call them bolos sometimes. Be on the lookout. But it's like,
I know a bolo tie.
Very, very different thing. But it's like, I understand that this is the 70s and like we're not as interconnected as the internet has made us nowadays. But like, someone had to know. Someone had to know that, like, hey, Psycho Dude might be coming back to the town, the only town he's ever known, because he got arrested when he was like 6. So of course, like,
right,
that's where he's going to come back to. And he's driving the nurse's car.
Even the Muppets in the Muppet movie changed cars. They
Jim Henson
when
knows.
Doc Hopper knew what their car looked like, they changed cars and they got a nickel back. Not the band. We don't
Look
even need
at
to talk
this
about the band.
photograph.
It's an APB for this woman's car, right? Yeah, so he drives around and then he buys a William Shatner mask, which I think is some of the most interesting lore in this movie. And it's not lore from the world of the film. It's the fact that that is a William Shatner mask
Mm-hmm.
that they used. I'm assuming from Star Trek.
I would imagine.
It'd have to be from Star Trek. And William Shatner has not been paid at all for that, which I was like, okay, he's not going to get paid.
Yeah.
That's not the point. But he brings it up all the time. So this time I was watching, I was trying to see. I was like, it's like, man, Captain Kirk must have had a really bad day. Um, but yeah, so the verisimilitude in this movie, I agree with you. It apparently in the Halloween lore, Michael Myers is like he can teleport. So yeah, so this is interesting with this franchise. I've only seen this movie, and I could be wrong about this, but from what I've heard, he can teleport. So they infuse more otherworldly elements into this honestly simple slasher story.
Yeah.
And one of those is that he can teleport. But I think he's almost more menacing when he's not attacking
Yeah.
because he doesn't ever speak. He breathes like an asthmatic, but he doesn't ever speak, and he's always kind of watching. Because
Mm-hmm.
like we talked about, this even though technically I guess it would maybe be considered a slasher film, it's a lot of just built up tension.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're like, we know what this dude is capable of. We have the doctor, which actually I kind of am okay with the way the doctor did tell don't show in that, where he's
Mm-hmm.
or actually the doctor himself is very afraid of him, and I think that's a very important piece to
Mm-hmm.
this to bring some legitimacy to what he can do, because he's like, no, this dude is unhinged, like you won't be able to outthink him because he doesn't think like a normal person.
Yeah.
So I actually really appreciated that, but I think the most interesting parts for me was this tension building of like, okay, when is he gonna finally pop out?
Yeah.
Because we know he's been watching the chick who was like making popcorn and somehow destroyed her clothes, which is a whole nother thing. Don't you know what an apron is? Okay, I actually never used an apron. I just don't wear white clothes. And yeah,
And it's
and
also not that hard to not make a mess when making popcorn.
right, like okay, that chick, what was her name? Abby,
Sure.
Annie, whatever her name is, right? Was maybe one of the dumbest chicks I've ever seen in any movie ever. Right? Okay, let's break this down really quickly. Um, so yeah, so apparently the linens are kept right next to the range.
Does that make sense?
Because that makes sense, right? So she changes out of her clothes and then puts on uh this shirt. And then she goes into, which I guess the laundry room is like in a separate building.
Yeah.
Which I would hate. Oh my gosh. I mean, you had to deal with that for years because where you lived in college,
Yeah.
the laundry room or the washing machines were all like at a different building.
Yeah. We had it was like a almost like an on-site laundromat. But it was so annoying. And I say this as probably one of the people at the complex that lived the closest to this building. But it was so
Yeah, it wasn't
annoying.
very far.
Yeah, like I walked there, but it was so annoying to like haul everything there and haul everything back. And it was terrible. I hated it. Um,
Right.
but also
So
like I would still put on pants to walk to and from the
look,
laundromat.
if we're being serious here, I think the one activity that you do, like one chore that you do in a house where people wear the least amount of pants is probably laundry.
Oh, 100%. But if I have to leave my house to do laundry, I'm going to wear pants.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like she went outside.
She had those nice like thigh high socks though. So I mean that's like reverse pants. Like instead of the pants coming from the
That's the
waist down,
opposite.
it came from the ankles up.
That is the opposite of pants. That is the opposite intent of pants.
Pants aside, which apparently she did because she had no pants on. She goes into this laundry room, doesn't turn on a light, which this movie was made for 300 and whatever $1,000 because the lighting budget was shit.
They couldn't even afford to turn on the light.
They couldn't afford to turn on the lights in half the movie. She didn't turn on the light. She knocked on the door. Nobody's home. Who would be in the,
Yeah.
like that gave me like Goblet of Fire vibes. Like, what if the old man, like Frank Bryce, the old man in the beginning of Goblet of Fire, he's like in a separate building on the Riddle estate. It's like he's not in there. Nobody's in there. And then she like is trying to get out. But in the next scene, there's a phone in that same building. So she didn't just use the phone to call the girl, the girl she was babysitting. I don't know. There's so many logic problems. But what really, I'm somebody that I need to have the lights on. Like when I walk into the room, the first thing I do is turn on the freaking light, unless there's a bunch of sunlight, because I want to be able to see.
Exactly.
And what I've never done laundry in the dark. That is not like an activity I think that should exist. Especially if I'm doing my work clothes, they're all black. So then I'm just screwed. But yeah, I don't that whole the logic behind not turning on the lights and basically all of this movie really, really annoyed me. And obviously the logic problems in slasher films are well known.
Yes.
But this one particularly, we're talking about Halloween 1978. Turn on the lights. Right? I mean, it's like that commercial for I think it's like Allstate or something, where it's like, oh, let's go hide. Oh, the car's running. Let's just jump into it and drive away. It's like, no, let's go hide behind the wall of chainsaws. Like that's literally the logic. And I'm like, come on. So I think that was pretty frustrating for me watching, because I was like, just turn on the lights. Also, I want to be able to see. I already have enough time. I already have hard enough time seeing in the dark because I have astigmatism. But obviously, they just didn't know that I would be watching it, like 40 years later. So
yeah, John Carpenter didn't think, Ben Sparrow is going to have poor eyesight. I should turn on the lights. That is not the thought.
One day, one day, a filmmaker is going to be like, I know Ben's going to watch this, so I'm going to make sure that it is the most properly lit film of all time. It's actually just a documentary about the sun. They're just slowly panning in. There's just a dolly shot, but the dolly shot is on like a spacecraft flying towards the sun.
The longest dolly shot ever. Then you get to the sun.
The dumbest dolly shot ever.
Like, what? You get to the sun, and then Swiper just pokes his head in and steals the sun. And he says, "Gotcha, sucker."
And then then they go on CNN, and Wolf Blitzer's like, "We're calling for Swiper to deliver the film, the footage. We're doing this documentary," and he swiped it anyway. Enough about Swiper and Dora in Halloween 1978. But yeah, so the lighting just really, really made me
mad. Okay. We've talked a lot about things we don't like in this movie. I can
continue if you'd like. Oh.
There's one thing I wanted to talk about that I did like, and it's the cinematography. I thought that is maybe one of the most successful parts of this movie, because the way in which they shot it, And before I go into all this, I'm gonna say that yes, I know they shot it mostly handheld because they were doing this for cheap and couldn't afford a dolly or a crane or anything else. But it works, so I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt here and say that this was intentional, even though I know it probably wasn't.
And you give them the benefit of the doubt more than you give me the benefit.
Oh, pish posh.
Hello, Gordon Ramsay.
I can't say Gordon Ramsay's vocabulary on this podcast. It's a family friendly show
correct.
here.
What are you? What are you? I'm an idiot sandwich.
Oh, where are we?
Welcome to Off the Rails, episode 3.
Cinematography.
Yes.
So most of it is either shot on a tripod or it's handheld. I feel like most of it's handheld. And I feel like that's really interesting because I feel like naturally when you see something that's shot handheld, it's obviously more shaky. It's obviously less stable. And I think one that heightens the uneasiness we're supposed to feel, especially towards the beginning of this movie when, like you pointed out, Michael Myers is just there. Like he's lurking, he's looming, and you have this just like uneasy like tension building up. And so I think the uneasy camera movement plays into that. But also, since we never know really when he's around or when he's not, we start the first shot of this movie is a POV shot.
That was very interesting.
And when you start with a POV shot and everything else is handheld, there's always this part of my mind that's like bringing me back to that first shot. I'm like, oh, is this Michael's POV or where's he going to pop out? You know?
Interesting.
Like that was just a motif that like it was so strong in that very first scene that like that it had the same kind of feel, it had the same kind of, you know, look to it. So we kept bringing back that handheld shot and it kept reminding me like, okay, especially in the sequences when it's daylight out and we're kind of like, okay, where's he going to pop out next? And like, is he going to pop out and murder someone?
It's almost like the idea of the unreliable narrator in a way, but it's like the unreliable cinematographer. And obviously we find out within the scene itself if that is his point of view or not, but it always does kind of come back because I noticed that as well. Like the very first sequence is all POV. Which I will say, apparently in a couple of shots, Michael Myers has really long hands and like really long arms. Because he like picks up the knife, and all this. Which you had a whole thing. You're like, that kitchen knife is larger than his forearm.
Well, yeah, because he picks up the kitchen knife, and I'm like, okay, that's like a normal kitchen knife. And then they like when they pull the mask off in the front yard, he's like holding it and like, yeah, he's like 6 or whatever, but like that's like a freaking like Roman short sword or something. Like that thing was like
a gladius. Yes.
Yes, you know, of course you know what that is.
Yes, 7 years of Latin.
Mm-hmm. You're one of those people, one of those guys that thinks about the Roman Empire all the time, aren't you? Because you took Latin
so much, and then people are like, "Oh, can you speak Latin?" And then I recite the same portion of one of it was Cicero's. He was debating Catiline, and it was like about the Catiline conspiracy, and I had to memorize it for Latin in high school, and I still remember that. And so I'll just break out and I'll just go into this, and it means nothing. Like it like literally has nothing to do with anything going on because it's like it has no relevance to anything. And so people are like, "Oh my gosh, you can speak Latin." I'm like I'm literally just quoting Cicero when he was just railing freaking Catiline. Anyway, yeah, that knife.
Yeah.
Yeah. And honestly, there wasn't a ton of blood on it afterward.
Right.
But yeah, because that POV shot, It's so interesting because a lot of times when we do that, I mean, that is almost an indication in my mind that okay, we're gonna have a character study on this guy,
Yeah.
right? We're really gonna think it through. I also like, speaking of the cinematography, we don't see Michael Myers's mask because we obviously don't see his face, but we don't see his mask for a significant portion of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's only shot shoulders down.
Yeah.
So you'd be remiss to think that that was just Vin Diesel because he wore the same freaking like jacket that Vin Diesel, like instead of a knife, if he had a Corona, you'd be like, okay, this is Fast 11. Um, but and Vin
For
Diesel just
family.
hasn't eaten family. Uh, yeah, but yeah. And speaking of family, he apparently carries around his mom's tombstone in the back of his car.
Is this his mom or
Because,
his sister?
like I said, his sister's tombstone in the back of his car. Because at the end of the movie, she walks in and bro just like sat the tombstone and then had her laying out. That I was like, dude, yeah, we know that was your first kill. Why, like, can't you have a less heavy calling card? Like that's got to be like 60 pounds. Why do you have a
That's
60-pound
that's why
calling card?
he's huffing and puffing the whole time because he had to carry that up a flight of stairs.
Yeah. Actually, the camera was shot like held onto the tombstone, and he was like walking around like this the whole time. Yeah. Like I said, the logic in this movie, and me
Exactly.
as an absolutely 100% logical and definitely not emotional person, it just really, you know, ground my gears. But
Yes,
I'm definitely not emotional.
the king of logic. Um, so
I'm the
yeah,
head of the logic board.
I really enjoyed the cinematography from that aspect, and also, um, it was like there was also this way that like it felt like it put me in the scene as well. It felt like I was an active participant in the scene rather than just an observer of the scene, which then I think heightens the danger because subconsciously you're watching this and you feel like, oh, is this a POV? Oh, is this like it makes you feel like you're in this, and therefore you feel like there's like an inherent danger to yourself, I think.
I mean, and also if you think about it, just like from us watching in 2023, you really don't see a lot of POV shots like that.
Right.
Like you don't see whole sequences shot POV. So
Mm-hmm.
honestly, from even a mod, it's still so effective because as a modern audience, that is not normal.
Right.
We don't see it like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because especially when he puts on the mask, then we have kind of you're seeing it through the eyelids. We don't see that on a daily basis.
Yeah.
That's not how we think of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Like we don't think of ourselves as doing a POV because we really don't think about it. Okay, we're like looking through anyway. But also in film, there's rarely a sequence where you are quite literally looking as the character.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it is even heightened even more with that mask because you can even have something like I think maybe the modern X-Men movies does this with Quicksilver when he's doing his run. It's a POV shot, but it's like not the same because
Yeah.
with the mask and it's just like a different, it just looks different. So that was definitely something that kind of stood out to me from the beginning. And you're absolutely right. I guess I didn't think of it this way, but every time there was kind of shaky cam and we couldn't see anybody else, like it wasn't like we weren't following somebody, was that Michael Myers.
Yeah.
The last thing I want to say, just really quickly, is yes, this is Jamie Lee Curtis's first like role. Like this is her breakout role. It says introducing Jamie Lee Curtis. But the guy that got top billing had maybe like 10 minutes of screen time, tops. Like this was her movie. And it was wild to me that I mean, they kind of banked on her, especially when you have, let's compare this to Temple of Doom,
Mm-hmm.
right? That introduced Ke Kwan, who also won an Oscar the same year Jamie Lee Curtis won an Oscar.
For the
Interesting.
same movie.
For the same movie. Um, he is clearly a supporting character. It's still Harrison Ford's movie, and we're introducing this new actor. But in this movie, Jamie Lee Curtis does basically all the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
She has the most screen time. Her character is the one we follow.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really interesting to me that they use the now like introducing Jamie Lee Curtis and didn't honestly just throw her in top billing. Obviously, she wasn't going to be paid the most,
Right.
but it is weird for the amount of screen time that the director and the production team would rely so much on her. And I can only imagine the reason why is because her parents are both really, really famous actors.
Right.
So I just thought that was kind of interesting. And that was the last kind of thing I wanted to mention.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, just as a side note, we talked about our parents. I find it very neat and interesting that we mention Psycho in the same podcast we're talking
yeah,
about.
because that's her
Halloween,
mom, right?
Because Janet Leigh is Jamie Lee Curtis's mom, and Tony Curtis is her father. But yeah, I feel like it's interesting. Obviously, Janet Leigh did other things besides Psycho, but I feel like if you go up to like just ask the normal person, especially someone of not of like her generation, or someone who is around that like saw like her work in theaters a lot, you asked like what's a Janet Leigh movie, you would probably say Psycho.
Yeah. If you
And
knew who Janet Leigh was.
yes. And yeah, I just think it's interesting that Jamie Lee Curtis's then first big movie is a horror movie.
That's a weird career start.
Yeah, like
That is kind of
I
weird.
wonder if she called her mom and it was like, "Mom, I'm doing this horror movie. Like you did Psycho. Like, do you have any advice?" And her mom was probably like, "Well, don't take any shit from Alfred Hitchcock."
And also make sure that they flush the toilet.
Yes.
Because in Psycho, that was the very first instance it made history of watching a toilet being flushed on screen.
Yes.
Yeah, and bro needed a little Drano. Like that was not as powerful as I was hoping. Um, but now is the time in the podcast where we switch over to Rosebud and Thorn. Jake, I'm gonna pass it off to you as I do every week. What are your Rosebud and Thorn?
So roses, I do have some. I'm going to say cinematography, like we just talked about. I think that was really successful. The score, it's one, iconic, and two, it really just kind of gives you an emotional grounding, especially when we don't really get that from the characters. And like I said, the main theme is so iconic, but I think as far as like score for the movie, I really like the counter melody as well. I feel like that adds more mystery and ambiance. At least I felt like that was more on key or on point with our emotional guideposts that I was looking for. So I give a rose for that. Jamie Lee Curtis for a first starring role. I thought she did a really good job and really kind of offered the only like substantial performance that we as the audience were able to like latch onto. I feel like in this movie,
Genuinely.
and I feel like without her, this movie, like we don't talk about this movie today. I feel like because like
Interesting.
yeah, it still exists as a slasher movie, but she gives you just enough to hang on to and stay throughout the whole movie, I think.
Yeah.
She gives you enough of a performance that you're like, okay, this isn't just hot garbage.
And
So I'm gonna,
especially with her name recognition now.
yeah,
I think us watching as a modern audience. Yeah,
yeah.
I agree.
And then you talked about the guy who got top billing, Donal Pleasence. He plays Dr. Loomis. I liked him because, like you pointed out, he is like the only one who understands what Michael Myers is capable of, and like that's really relatable because like we as the audience see him do that first murder of his sister, so it's almost like he's the only one that's like we're on the same like level with, like we're the only ones that get it. So I feel like
Mhm.
his character is really interesting, and I felt like he also gave a good performance.
I agree.
Um, so those are my roses. Bud is going to be the sound quality. Like we talked about, that first half for me is really just it. when it was recorded, it was not understood like the proper just like technical parameters needed to get the quality of product that should be expected, and the standard that is for a full length motion picture. So that was really that really took me out of the movie a lot. So that's a bud. And then Thorn, really, I mentioned the two actors, Donal Pleasence and Jamie Lee Curtis. Every other actor like phoned this in. I mean, they're just terrible. So like, I mean, I didn't notice any difference in the quality of acting from the child actors to the adult actors, really. Besides Jamie Lee Curtis and Donal Pleasence, like it is just there's nothing there.
Yeah,
and so that was a big disappointment for me. And then no depth, like we talked about, because like yes, I know that's not the purpose of the movie, but I feel like it would just be like such a better movie if we went into like more of Michael's backstory.
You will never need to apologize for adding depth to a story.
Exactly.
That's what makes something interesting, is adding depth, adding canon. And so it's really frustrating, like you said, and I would agree, because
like,
there's no depth. Why am I watching?
Yeah, and I feel like I've seen this movie, and I know we let off the podcast saying I don't like horror movies, and I don't like horror movies. I'm never gonna watch this again, probably, unless like someone else wants to watch it. And it's not because like it's a
and
horror
what
movie.
Would her name be? That's the other thing we need to figure out.
Exactly. I would also like to know what her name would be. Just help me be on the lookout.
Let us know in the comments down below what her name will be.
But it's just like I know when the jump scares are gonna come. And like, yeah, I'll probably still get like a jump scare reaction, but there's no story there. So why am I going to rewatch it? And I feel like that's honestly why you go back and rewatch something. Like if it's a good story, even though you know everything that's going to happen, if it's a good story, you're going to go back and rewatch it because you enjoy watching the story be told. And this is just not a story I enjoyed watching be told.
That's very, very valid. For me, my roses, I only have a couple. Donald Loomis, I agree. I thought his character, I wanted to see so much more from him, but I thought he was really interesting. He was really interesting for us as an audience. He really helped us understand what the stakes were. As he's this psychiatrist or he's this doctor or whatever, and he's even scared of this dude. I liked the score, and specifically, I don't know, it's played enough that I don't even want to call it a leitmotif.
Yeah.
Like I think it's just like you know what I mean? Like it's almost like Michael Myers' theme. And it's kind of a leitmotif, but it's like so heavy-handed that I almost don't want to call it that.
It's not light.
Nothing in this freaking movie is light.
Especially
let me get to my thorns. So yeah, I thought that was really interesting. Jamie Lee Curtis, I think I'll give her a rose just for a great first performance and really carrying this movie. Yeah, I think those are the only real roses for me. Buds, audio quality, I'm going to agree with. I think that there's the potential for some story, so I'd give like the concept a bud. But because there was no story, it ain't getting no rose. And then thorns, I have so many. Basically this whole movie. But here's the thing. I didn't hate this movie. Right? You noticed, and we've done this enough that folks at home would expect me to say, I'm glad you enjoyed this movie, but I did not. I didn't say that because as a slasher movie, I know it's not always going to be story driven. That doesn't mean though that that's not going to be one of my thorns, which is story. I wanted them to explore this so much more. There's this lack of depth depth that you mentioned that is 100% true. That I wanted to see more. I wanted to see more. I think there was some potential here that was just missed. Um, the lighting is an absolute thorn for me. The logic in this movie is a thorn for me. And granted, these thorns are not going to be for everybody, because some people are going to be like, okay, I can kind of live with that if I'm going to get the scare. But for me, I like it low key takes me out of the movie when I'm like, why are you not turning on the light? This is not
Yeah.
like, maybe you've been to this house a few times, right? But that's not your laundry room. How do you know where the box of Tide is? Which, shout out to the box of Tide. How many people use box of Tide anymore? Nobody.
Do they even
Always
make
use.
it?
I think they do. I think they do, but I mean, I always use the jug.
Yeah.
I don't use Tide Pods because that challenge was stupid.
Yeah. I don't need a snack.
Yeah, I'm not hungry. Why would I get Tide Pods?
Oh man.
Anyway, so those are my rosebuds and thorns. Typically, we now go into who we think we are. But I don't know if you felt this, but for me, there was so little story and so little character depth. I'm gonna be honest here. I couldn't pick somebody.
Yeah, I was like
You were grasping at straws.
very much so.
So this movie is one of the rare movies where we are going to skip that, because that, to me, like, okay, we don't know anything about any of these characters
Yeah.
other than Laurie's too chicken to ask out a girl. And 4 years ago, you would have said that would be me, because I would be too chicken to ask out a girl. But that's not true anymore. So doesn't mean that means that there's success there. It's not true anymore. So we're gonna skip that, and we're gonna move straight into final thoughts. Jake, as always, I'm gonna pass it off to you. What are your final thoughts?
Final thoughts. This is a movie I've watched once and I probably won't revisit again, like I said. Just because like there's no depth, and like you made a very good point. Like if you're watching this movie for the scare, like more power to you. I love that for you. Like watch it, enjoy the scares. Happy Halloween. Kudos to you.
Happy Halloween. I'm done.
I need a story. That's
Yeah.
why I love movies. That's why I do this podcast. That's why I watch movies. That's why I enjoy talking about movies. I need a story. And so when there is literally like no story, that is always going to just be a movie that I'm like, yeah, we're done. Yeah. So I mean, like I said, if you want the jump scares, more power to you. I love that for you. Enjoy. But this is not the movie for me.
Yeah. I'm pretty much in the same boat. I like if I'm working right on the computer and I've got my headphones in and somebody walks up to me and like taps me on the shoulder, I got more of a jump scare just then. Just the idea, thinking about it, gave me more of a jump scare than that movie did. So yeah, like, you have to be in the right kind of mood. And I think in the you enjoy films like this to really enjoy this. But the point of this podcast is to watch all different kinds of movies, even movies that we don't like, and talk about it. But yeah, I would agree. If you like story, if you want to have, if there is a purpose, if you want to watch a movie with a purpose, this really isn't the movie for you. Now, granted, there is a purpose. The purpose is to scare you. But if you want story depth, if you want character study, you're not getting those here. And that just kind of comes with the territory. I think if I think about it, I think I only own one movie that would be considered, three movies that would be considered like horror movies in a way, right? I own the 2018 Invisible Man with what's her face, Elizabeth Moss. Yeah, that's actually a really good movie. I really enjoyed that one. And then I own both of the Quiet Place movies that have come out so far. One is coming out next year. But guess what? There's a whole heck of a lot of story in those.
Exactly.
And they're really well directed too. Yeah. So I reserve the right to like those, but not like horror in general. But the real question is for you folks at home. Do you like horror movies? Do you like slasher movies? Do you like the jump scares? Did you like Halloween? All of these questions and more. Feel free to answer them in the comments down below. We really do love hearing from you. And let us know your favorite horror movie or favorite Halloween movie. If you like this video, make sure to hit that like button and hit that subscribe button, ringing that bell to get all notifications on upcoming content. We have three more spooky cinephile entries, including next week, which is going to be Dracula.
Yes.
And make sure to follow us on social media as well. Follow the Cinefile, Jake, and myself. You got the links right there. But for Jake Biller, I'm Ben Sparrow. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you back here next week. Make sure to watch Dracula, 1931, I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
And until then, cut.